What's up, guys? Today we're doing a rear disc brake conversion on a 71 Cutlass. It's gonna be the second video in this series of updating the 71 Cutlass to all 4 disc brakes. In the last video, we got the front done. We used a dual piston front caliper from Willwood. We paired that up with a 1-inch bore master cylinder from Willwood. I'll explain later in the video why the 1-inch bore is important, because it ended up not being correct, but we'll get to that later in the video. Anyways, first and the most obvious is to get the rear wheels off. We had to remove the cover on the rear end so we could pull the spider gears and the pin and then remove both of the axles. You have to remove the axles to be able to do this conversion. All right, guys, so the next thing is just to rotate everything enough to where you have access to this bolt right here. On the other side, there won't be a bolt going in that holds this little pin right here. So that bolt just runs this way and holds the pin up. So if you take that bolt out, then we can rotate everything the opposite way and facing us, and then drive the pin out towards us from the opposite side. Sometimes you gotta wedge a flathead in there just to get enough bite on it, but it should come out. That's good. That's good. That's great. Yeah, basically make sure that your drain pan isn't sitting up there when you do that. Let's just act like that didn't happen. Well, now that we've taken a shower in this, we're going to just kind of act like that didn't happen. Just keep moving. There is so much. Oh, it's all over the place. Okay, anyways, but yeah, you're gonna wanna remove that bolt. Oh my gosh, it's everywhere. I hope that came loose after that. Yeah, it did. Okay. So, I'm gonna take that out. All right, so now I just kind of like to drive it across and then flip it over and then pull it out the rest of the way from the other side. So, we're gonna do that real quick. All right, guys, so now I'm working on removing the axles, and I've got both of them out, and I actually have the rotors fitted up to them already. But basically, what you do is the axle sits in here like this, and in this case, the axles just drive out this way towards you. On some other rear ends, you have to actually like push the axle in, and then there's a C-clip that you can get to whenever the axle comes in through the middle, and I've just kind of got that pin in there temporarily to hold the gears in. So the hub on the end of the axle, you can kind of spin it around to get to these nuts right here, zip all those off, and then that loosens the flange so that you can take an axle puller, which I have right here, and this just goes right where your studs would, and you can just crank it down a little bit and then hammer the axle out. All right, so from there, this whole piece is actually able to come forward. You kind of have to wiggle it to come off. The only piece left holding it on is the emergency brake and then your brake line. So you just have to undo the brake line fitting and then just take off this emergency brake. It just kind of comes up to about here, and I'll show you how to disconnect that. All right, guys, so here's the rear end, and you come up to wherever this little linkage is right here. And basically all you're gonna do is turn this, and you're gonna see a slot right there. And basically you're gonna kind of twist this towards this cable. I can't do this with one hand, but then that'll bring the end of this line right center in the middle of this bigger section. And then you can just pull that line straight out through the back. So, all right, guys, so we've got our caliper bracket mounted up, and we went ahead and put the rotor on the axle. So the only thing that we're gonna do now is we have a shim that we're just gonna be putting right here. So normally these are to kind of like center up the caliper, but in our case, this is actually gonna fill in a little bit of space between the flange and the little piece of the flange that mates up on the axle, because if not, it'll kind of like bend it around. Essentially, the backing plate for the drum brake system was about the same thickness as this. So that's what this is going to be taking up the space for. We're gonna go ahead and throw the axle in here. All right, so we're gonna hop to a time lapse, make sure that our rotor's looking good, everything's spinning good, and then we're gonna go ahead and throw all of our hardware in and make sure that the caliper is actually gonna sit right where it needs to be, like centered with the rotor. All right, guys, we've gotten the caliper mounted up on the back. And if you look through this hole right here, it looks like it's off center. And normally that's how you kind of like look in there to see if it's centered up or not. But if you look at it from this direction, and I haven't pressed the brake pedal at all because obviously the plumbing is not even hooked up, but it's perfectly centered between the pads. So that's what you're wanting. If you look through this hole and just try to make sure it lines up, because like the hole goes way over here and then all this stuff is not. So like instructions sometimes will tell you to use that hole to see if it's centered, but I'm just saying on this style caliper, just go ahead and just kind of feel. Just stick your fingers in there and make sure there's like even space. That way whenever you compress the brake pad, then it's just going to be even where both sides of the brake rudder, and no problem at all. Sitting on this side, I got everything buttoned up. I still have to throw the caliper on, but I'm not going to bore you with doing the same thing twice. So then it's just a matter of sealing up this rear end and making sure that nothing is going to leak, refilling it, and then we can run our plumbing. All right, so I've got everything reassembled right here. I got the spider gears back in there. We're getting ready to put a new seal on and get everything sealed up, but wanted to real quickly show you that if you take this pin out and you're messing with the axles and stuff like that, then more than likely your spider gears are gonna fall out if you don't put the pin back in. It's really easy. All you do is set the spider gear right here, and then you go over here and just rotate the axle with your hand. And then once it's on the other side and you can just kind of see straight across, you put the other one on this side and then rotate it, and then it'll line it up where you can get the pin top and bottom. So now everything's lined up, everything's operating perfectly, not bound up in any way. So remember that if you lose your spider gears, you can just set them in there and rotate it and get it up in there without having to take all the other gears out. Also, you'll see that we have the caliper on the back side of the car now. And then if you look back here, we have a nice straight shot for the emergency brake. Got everything mounted up, and essentially you just keep pumping these. You can use an adjustable wrench. Just kind of keep pumping it until it's enough to hold this and prevent you from spinning it by hand. So we have all that set. Now the last thing is just to get everything cleaned up, get everything plumbed, get the rear end sealed up, get this whole brake system tied up. All right, guys, so the reason I specified at the beginning of this video that it was a 1-inch master cylinder is because it was actually the wrong master cylinder, and we needed 1 1/8 inches, I think is what they ended up sending. So when I called Willwood, I talked him through the issue, told them what parts I was putting on the car, and the issue was the piston area. And apparently that size master cylinder, being 1 inch, was not able to feed all the brakes like it should. It was like it was reaching its max capacity. All right, so I got the bigger master cylinder put in the car, and the brake pedal definitely felt better, but it still felt like when the car was off, you had a solid pedal, and then when you would turn the car on and it was getting vacuum assistance, it was kind of a soft pedal. So ended up doing some testing on that and found out that the engine vacuum was low and it was very bouncy on the gauge, the vacuum gauge. And when I say that the pedal felt soft, I mean that the pedal would travel and then it would get very, very stiff to where it felt like you were using manual brakes there towards the very end of its throw. So in order to fix that, it was gonna have to be some engine work. And so the caliper bracket for the rear had to be ground out just a little bit because the rear axle tube has a little bit of a swell on it where that mount wouldn't fit directly over that swelled part. So we had to just take a little bit of material out and then it slid right over there, no problem. Everything lined up, all the holes lined up. So no serious modifications, just to kind of get around that little swell. So if you were watching part 1 and you're waiting for part 2, I am sorry that it took a little bit of a delay. Been very busy on the Corvette, and there will be another video coming out very soon on the Corvette because we have the turn signals all glassed back in there. So that will be in the very, very near future. Just to give you guys a little sneak peek, we cut a lot of material off where they had taken the turn signal from the outside and then moved it inside. So we just kind of hacked everything out of here. And it, like I said, it was a lot. There was even some metal mixed in there, as you can see with the reflection of the steel right there. But we took all that out and I went ahead and started glassing everything in. So it's going to be a long process in finishing out this repair, and then we have to do the same thing over here for the glassing and making sure that this is a smooth taper. But still have some work to do with the fitment and everything, but that'll be in the next video. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Down in the description, I'm going to include a link to another video that I watched with the thread-in type pistons for rear GM calipers. It's from another channel, which I'll link to up here in the corner, but it was such a huge help. It really showed you how those thread-in pistons work, and also how to set the parking brake adjustment and everything like that. So I will link to that in the corner and down in the description so that you guys can go check that out. Again, if you haven't already, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. It looks like a lot of people on the analytics are watching a lot of the videos, like return viewers, but they're not subscribed to the channel. So if you could, please go and make sure that the subscribe button is lit up. But other than that, I will catch you guys in the next video.